¿Cómo está? Bienvenido a la jugada crítica de Telesur. Le seguimos la pista a la situación sociopolítica en el Líbano tras la renuncia del ejecutivo del primer
after the
ministro
executive's resignation of Prime Minister has said that after the explosions of the port of Beirut on August 4th, what is the balance of material and human damage? In whose hands is the country? How is the course of investigations going? What international pronouncements stand out so far? Let's deploy the board. We're making the first move. The now former Prime Minister Hassan Diab resigned, not before highlighting that what happened in the port of Beirut on August 4th is the result of a crisis marked by deep-rooted corruption, and against which he could not fight. The growing interest of international actors such as the United States, France and Germany in conditioning their aid, especially regarding the investigation of the events. Let's hear some reactions.
Nos concentramos en el pueblo en sus demandas,
we focus on
de
the
que rindan
people
cuenta a
in
los
their demands
responsables
to
de esta
hold accountable
catástrofe,
those
que lleva
responsible
7
for
años
this
en marcha,
catastrophe
a su
that had
solicitud
been
de un
going on
cambio
for
real,
7
de
years.
pasar de un gobierno
Their
de
demand
corrupción
for
y
real
malicia,
change,
de
to move
corredores
from
y
a government
robos,
of
a un
corruption
país
and
con
malice,
Estado de
of
Derecho,
racketeering and
justicia y
theft,
transparencia,
to a country
a un
with the
país
rule
que
of law,
respete a su pueblo.
justice and transparency,
Frente a esta
to a
realidad,
country that
damos un
respects
paso
its
atrás
people.
para apoyar
In the
al
face
pueblo,
of this
para
reality, we
emprender la
take a
batalla
step
por el
back
cambio
to
junto
support the
al pueblo.
people, to
Queremos
wage
abrirle
the
la
battle
puerta
for change
a la
with the people.
salvación nacional,
We want to
con la
open the
ayuda de
door to
todos los
national
libaneses.
salvation with the
Por
help
eso,
of all the
declaro
people
la
of
renuncia de este
Lebanon.
gobierno.
Therefore,
Que Dios
I
proteja
declare
al
the
Líbano.
resignation of this
Que Dios lo
government.
guarde.
May God protect
Viva el
Lebanon.
Líbano.
May God protect Lebanon.
Hubo falta de conciencia o
There was
negligencia
a
al
lack of
realizar los
consciousness
procedimientos
or negligence
necesarios
in
para que
carrying
no
out the
lleguemos a
necessary
lo que
procedures
sucedió. Pudo
so
haber
that we
sido un
don't get to
accidente
what
por
happened.
negligencia
Could
o
have been an
injerencia
accident due to
extranjera a
negligence
través de
or
un
foreign
misil o una
interference
bomba.
through a missile or a bomb.
Exigimos un gobierno fuerte,
We demand a
capaz y
strong,
políticamente
capable,
protegido.
and politically protected government. A government that is not protected politically is not use being strong if it's not protected by political forces and the main parliamentary blocs in the Lebanese parliament. It can't do anything. We call for the formation of a government of national unity, and if that's not possible, a government that endures the widest possible representation for politicians and
Francia está del
experts.
lado del Líbano, siempre lo ha estado.
France is on the side of Lebanon, has always been, and now more than ever, after this tragedy that has caused many deaths and injuries and has left many citizens in shock.
El pueblo libanés es libre.
The Lebanese people is free, proud and sovereign. It is up to the authorities to act so that the country does not collapse and to respond to the aspirations that the Lebanese people are legitimately expressing in the streets of Beirut. At this time, we must do everything together so that neither violence nor chaos prevails. Those who have an interest in division and chaos are the powers that we who like to harm in some way the Lebanese people, peace and stability in the whole region.
A raíz de esta tragedia, nosotros como
In the
muchos
wake of
otros,
this tragedy,
esperamos una
we, like
investigación
many
creíble
others,
y
expect
transparente
credible and
de las
transparent
circunstancias que
investigation
llevaron a la explosión.
into the
La Oficina
circumstances that
Federal de
led to the
Investigaciones
explosion.
de
The
Estados
U.S.
Unidos
Federal
pronto
Bureau
estará
of
aquí para
Investigation will
ayudar.
soon
De
be there
alguna
to
manera,
help.
este trágico
Somehow,
evento
this
fue solo
tragic
un
event
síntoma
was
de
only a
males mucho
symptom
más
of
profundos
much
en el
deeper
Líbano.
ills in Lebanon,
Males que han durado
evils
demasiado
that have
tiempo.
lasted far too long.
Desafortunadamente, todos los que
Unfortunately,
están en la
all those in
autoridad son
authority are
responsables de
somehow
alguna
responsible.
manera. Hablo de
I
décadas de
speak
mala
of
gestión,
decades of
corrupción y
mismanagement,
el fracaso
corruption,
reiterado de
and the
los
repeated
líderes
failure of
libaneses
Lebanese
para
leaders
emprender una
to
reforma
undertake
significativa y
meaningful and
sostenida.
sustained reform.
¿Qué tal si hacemos un recordatorio de lo
Let's
sucedido
recall
en el
what
puerto de
happened in the
Beirut
port
a
of
principios de
Beirut
mes, que
at the
agudizó
beginning
la
of
crisis
month,
por la que ya
which
venía atravesando
aggravated
el
the
Líbano?
crisis that Lebanon
Ahí
was
está.
already going through.
El pasado 4 de agosto,
On August
dos
4th,
explosiones
two
casi
almost
simultáneas
consecutive
sacudieron el puerto
explosions
de
shook
Beirut.
the Beirut port,
Tuvieron como epicentro un depósito
had
donde
as
se
their
encontraban
epicenter a
almacenadas
warehouse where 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate were stored that had been there for 6
El
years.
resultado,
The result,
destrozos en la mitad de la
destruction of half the infrastructure of the Lebanese capital, around 180 dead, 6,000 injured, and at least 30 missing, 300 homeless, and nearly 8,000 historical buildings reduced to rubble.
2 semanas después,
2
los
weeks
equipos de
later,
rescate continúan
rescue
en la
teams are still
recuperación de
recovering
cadáveres,
bodies,
tras descartar
having
la
ruled out the
existencia
existence
de
of
sobrevivientes
survivors
en la
in
zona de
and
las
around the area of the
detonaciones y sus
detonations.
alrededores. Según el gobernador de Beirut,
According to the
Marwan
governor of Beirut,
las
Marwan
pérdidas
Aboud,
rondan entre
the losses
12.000
are
y
between 10 and
15
15
billones de
billion
dólares.
dollars. The incidents only exacerbated the economic and socio-political crisis that Lebanon had already been suffering from, a state on the verge of bankruptcy due to the corruption rooted in almost all of its structures, according to both the former Prime Minister Hassan Diab and the people. In this context of devastation, there is also a rapid increase in cases of COVID-19 infection. Given the magnitude of the tragedy, international donors have pledged some 300 million in humanitarian assistance, food security, education, and housing. Actions will reportedly be led by the UN and several non-governmental organizations. On August 17, authorities extended the state of emergency in the capital for another month. The army was granted exceptional power. Security agencies have the power to ban meetings, establish curfews, conduct searches, and impose military jurisdiction over civilians. The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Lebanon, Shabel Ribl, announced the creation of a center to investigate the causes of the incident. He stressed that those responsible for the negligence will be punished by a committee of judges. For his part, the head of the Interior, Mohammed Fahmy, explained that 23 people have been arrested pending the investigation process, and the maximum penalties will be applied to the perpetrators of the disaster. President Michel Aoun explained that the investigation was divided into three parts. The first seeks to determine the circumstances surrounding the cargo that caused the explosions. The second focused on finding out where it came from and who sent it. And the third focused on who was responsible for operating it and keeping it safe. And also announced that it requested satellite images to define if there was an impact from the air, as it does not rule out the possibility of a missile attack. In response to preliminary satisfactions, the Lebanese president ruled out altogether that the incident was caused by acts of Hezbollah. Let's update more information with our correspondent Wafika Ibrahim from Beirut, the capital of Lebanon. Many greetings to you, Wafika. Please update us. How is the situation today? Hello, how are you? Well, the situation that shook Lebanon, particularly the capital and its suburbs, brought the death of 177 people and more than 7,000 were injured. And there are still people missing since the day of the explosion. The prosecution considered that this attack really shook the national security of the nation and turned Beirut into a devastated capital. The prosecution also did not rule out the possibility of an aggressive or perhaps terrorist act. In addition to the aftermath of this situation, Lebanon was in the last days under the impact of the great dissatisfaction of the ruling issued by the International Tribunal in the case of the assassination of Prime Minister Hariri, and therefore there are calls to avoid falling again in another international tribunal for the case of the explosion of the port, something that the Lebanese right wing is claiming, the March 14th group. It is the first time in the history of the Western world that an international court issues a statement condemning a person without any evidence, without video recordings, without audio recordings, without recordings of a phone call, without witnesses saying I saw that or I heard that, without a money transfer. It's a tribunal of the anonymous and unknown. The special court for Lebanon in its trial chamber decided that there is no evidence of the supposedly responsibility of Hezbollah and Syria in relation to the assassination of Hariri. And the text was very clear in that sense. This is an issue that politically the right wing and the enemies of the resistance have been exploring for 15 years in a row. A tribunal that cost the Lebanese people over $1 billion. Half of those $1 billion are paid by the Lebanese people as taxes, and furthermore, the state in that way have taken over the savings of the Lebanese depositors, the banks, to pay an international tribunal that knows nothing that has been unable to contribute anything for 15 years in a row. Everything is happening while the Western armored vehicles are still off the coast of Beirut, a topic on which the Emdrad Deputy, head of the Lebanese resistance bloc in parliament, commented and said that the objective of the armored vehicles off Beirut was not military, but a simple demonstration. About the new government, he said that the United States has again set limits and conditions for the formation of the new government, after France had clearly spoken of a government of national unity, and added that there is no problem with any initiative as long as they are respected. He also announced that the last description presented by the foreign delegations visiting Lebanon about the next government is the need for an independent government. Regarding the initiatives of the new government, Arad commented that these clashed with each other because of conflicts of interest, and also added that it now brings complications.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo corro.
To keep myself healthy, I study.
Για να διατηρηθώ υγιής, τρέφομαι σωστά.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo bailo.
Para mantenerme saludable, yo purifico mi espíritu a través del cuerpo. ¿Y tú?
Get your body. Tuesdays, only on Telesur. The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transform the world today. Mondays, only on Telesur.
Telesur English presents a weekly program to discuss the political, economic and social issues affecting the Caribbean community. We'll challenge stereotypes and unpack the diversity of the region through the analysis of unique cultures, religions and art. We Caribbean. Wednesdays, only on Telesur.
Desde octubre del año pasado, miles de personas salieron a las calles de las principales ciudades libanesas en rechazo a la complicada situación económica por la que atraviesa
facing the Arab nation. The trigger for the demonstrations was the decision by the government of the Prime Minister Saad Hariri to impose taxes on certain sectors. Social pressure forced him to back down from his plan, but this did not calm down the citizens who also demanded the resignation of the premier. In December, Hassan Diab was appointed as the new Prime Minister. His execution of a technocratic nature focused on the implementation of an economic and anti-corruption plan, whose fulfillment was interrupted by the resignation of the president, days after the double explosion in the port of Beirut on August 4th. The detonations and the multiple material and human damages they left behind catalyzed the citizen protest. Despite the restrictions imposed by the pandemic, the people confronted the security forces in the streets and demanded responsibility for what is considered the worst disaster in the history of Lebanon. The political crisis in the Lebanese nation was triggered by the economic meltdown, with high unemployment, record levels of inflation, and liquidity problems. Recently, the worst devaluation of the currency, the Lebanese pound, in 30 years was registered. Faced with this fall, the banks decided to suspend the delivery of dollars to savers, which was not well received by an already unhappy population. We start the analysis in our critical move. We have from Venezuela, Bassem Tujudin, and from Chile, Nicola Hocha. Both are experts in Middle Eastern issues. Welcome both of you to our critical move. They are very talking people. They like to talk a lot. So we're going to do some sort of a summarizing exercise as much as possible so that we can have enough time to discuss the situation that is currently happening in the Lebanese nation. So Nicola, if you allow me, I'll start with Bassem. Until today, there are several elements that are put on the geopolitical board. I am particularly struck by this information, which also was told us by our friend Wafika Ibrahim, and it's about the investigation that is underway, the one that is wanted, or the one that the United States proposes to add to the FBI. How are you, friend? We are talking people because we have many arguments. That is why. How are you? Well, yes, it shouldn't be a surprise that they want to take advantage of this opportunity to ravel even more the situation. And we could say that probably to save the responsibility of us, who has been pointing it out as maybe the main responsible of what recently happened in Lebanon. Why? I say it again, because of this ammonium nitrate. It doesn't explode just because it does it. It needs an element, something that generates that action, and that for a long time it's been pointed out that maybe a missile could have been used as this element that was needed to generate this explosion. So let's just remember that the moments where we were remembering Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that it looks like a nuclear motion. And now it's located in the center of Beirut, right in the coast. And talking about that possibility of that missile, Michel Aoun himself, president of Lebanon, says he does not rule out the possibility, while ignoring those comments that try to blame Hezbollah for the authorship of these events. Yes, I take the word of Prime Minister, but President Donald Trump himself, who rapidly went ahead and to say that it didn't see him. So it was clearly the intention of the United States that it was to keep a bad reputation of something that it seems like it was like throwing the stone and then hide in your hand. But however, we are responsible people as journalists. So we just leave this as an hypothesis about the responsibility and seriousness. But however, this hypothesis, it's very good one, that this might be generated as an element, maybe a missile that could have been thrown by Israel. There is a war state between Israel and Lebanon that hasn't stopped. So there is a war state that it's currently alive. And in other occasions, Israel has generated aggression against Lebanon or against the Syrian army inside Lebanon and also in Syria. So there is something that it's continuing is something clear that there is an intention from Israel that may be using this as a pretext accomplished what in this way accomplished with this, that is a social explosion, and that rapidly international media accused Hezbollah of this act that sometimes sounds even ridiculous. Okay, well, if you allow me, I'd like to ask Nicola about this same reflection that I've been holding with you, the fact that the FBI is inserted, which is a U.S. agency, could lead us to the conclusion, and here we are only speculating, but at the same time it is a valid thing, that Israel has responsibilities in this act with a faithful supporter of the Zionist state as the United States has been historically, as we popularly said, stop Israel? Well, this is really nice to greet you, and I also send a greeting to Bassem. Well, I think that we are seeing here is an accelerated conspiration that is related to the whole sectors. Obviously, that the intention of bringing in the FBI by the United States, where no one had asked it, but he has intruded like in many parts in the world without respecting anyone's sovereignty. FBI is no other thing than a political agency that is used politically in spite of it's a good investigation agency, but it's never going to go against Israel. So I agree with Tajidi in the sense that this is no coincidence, because curiously, 20 days before the explosion, already the Saudi Arabian newspapers, the American and French news, started a campaign against Lebanese and Hezbollah. And along with this, along with the commercial blockade by Europe and United States with Lebanon to promote the economical bloc, well, it turns out all of these elements lead us to think that they're trying to do something, to get something much bigger. United States doesn't want to get involved. Neither the Americans can't beat such a face that get into Lebanon without speaking it. It's an instruction, and just wanted to send the FBI is nothing less than trying to protect that criminal Israel, that criminal state which is Israel, capable of doing something that such as criminal as provoking that explosion. None of this is by coincidence. Everything has a cause and a consequence, and we need to look at this within France and United Kingdom, Saudi Arabia, United States intentions, alongside all the traders sectors that given the resistant front in Lebanon, because what we're looking here is avoiding that Iran have a way out to the Mediterranean Sea, and that the route that it's been created between Iran, Syria, and Lebanon, which would give a huge impulse to the commerce, breaking all the links that the United States has over Syria. And politically, the state of Israel is also in an internal crisis that is searching out any military exit to help out Netanyahu, and on the other hand, Donald Trump, just to appear as a king of diplomacy, when we all know that Donald Trump, it's a person that it doesn't have a clear mind, let's say that. And he's not a statistic, he does not have capacity to become a statistic person. And probably he will win the elections. Thank you. Well, Bassem, along with this thing that Nicola has just said, and our friend Wafika was telling us that already in the surroundings of the port of Beirut, there is a presence of boats of these three powers to which she was referring: United States, France, Germany, who had also announced help, but conditional help with the assistance of the Foreign Minister Mas. That also gives us some information, right, about who is stalking if we see to a lesser extent the port of Beirut, but to a great extent who is stuck in that area that practically constitutes the balcony to the Mediterranean Sea, but it's also the door to the Middle East. Yes, also greetings to Nicolas, and I like to hear his words. Well, that is true, and they always have done this. Try to blackmailing, let's say, with their presence to the political forces, or backing up, in this case, those political forces in Lebanon that today are getting so weak because of everything that this tragedy has generated, but above all, supporting Israel. This is a way of proving that what Israel has been. This is a very valuable hypothesis with all that history of crimes committed by Israel, and especially against the Lebanese and Palestinian people. And as far as Hezbollah, the forces of resistance, well, they're going to respond, and obviously everything in the midst of this situation started in this region. This geopolitical change that it's being experienced in the region, practically with more weaknesses, Hezbollah, the forces of resistance, well, they're going to respond, and obviously everything in the midst of this situation started in this region. This geopolitical change that it's being experienced in the region, practically with more weaknesses in places such as in Iraq, and linked directly to the United States, and all that has to do with the resistant eggs, Iraq, with their military presence. And naturally, Israel, but I mean in this geopolitical change where it gains more power, the forces of resistance, and Lebanon, and especially Iran, who are leading these countries. I understand that the presence of the people, what they're planning to do is to support Israel, as well as Nicolas said. Naturally, this proposal of this guest that it's not welcomed, let's say, that comes from a nation such as the United States, to bring the FBI, can you believe that, to investigate what happened in that port. Well, naturally, there is an intention, which is support Israel until this whole situation is cleared up, and for instance, and of course maintain this pressure in all that is happening in the whole region, and especially on the political forces in Lebanon, which has generated practically the end. I remember back in the 80s, something that happened with the war in Lebanon, and today it's been brought out again. It's been under discussion due to its anti-democratic discussion about, especially political, especially that Wafika was highlighting. This international tribunal, which has been paid lots and lots of money from the Lebanese people, money that has been destined, it should have been destined to education, to health, to the feeding of the Lebanese people. So this failure, agreement, that situation that the Lebanon has been facing for a very long time with this absurd political anti-democratic, and therefore it's back on discussion today. So that is why this political presence is after, and this Emmanuel Macron position and also United States position is to keep Lebanon under chaos. So maybe this is the major political that the United States is leading against it. Thank you, Hassan. Nicola, talking about the presence of some political forces in Lebanon, to which Hassan was referring to, there is also a demand from powers such as the United States to create a government of independent character. Wafika was telling us about it, but I think this concept is very empty. How do you see it? Well, this government that United States is pretending, it's what they called a soft coup. That is a coup attempt. It's a coup attempt because no one is absolutely independent. No one is. On the other hand, independent government or moderate government or impartial government, well, those are the governments that United States is looking for, because when US says this is a moderate government, no, it's a government that supports its interests. And when it says it's independent, it's because it's a government that supports its own interests. And what's happening in Lebanon, that they should do a political change when it comes to reform. It should end this constitution that divide Lebanon in religious concessions. So that is something that is always happening on the internal problem where forces are gathering, not depending on their social condition or their social class, but because of their faith, their religious creed. So the United States, France, what they are looking really is to dominate Lebanon. I'm sorry, I'm going back. What France said when Macron, without being invited, he just came out of the blue and said that he's going to give so unselfish aid, but it set some political conditions, and the second condition is the non-armed of resistance, that is the disarmed of Hezbollah. But no, neither Macron or United States, they're not asking Israel to disarm, so they are not asking Israel to leave the territory of. So this is something that I think is absurd. Also, in the interior, they are agitating right now the more reactionary forces. So they all have started to speak, taking many fake news that the corruption, the need of taking out this government of their power. In other words, these forces are talking about carrying out a civil war. Who can use a civil war? Only to the right wing, to the extreme right wing, to Israel, to the United States. But the extreme right wing, the one who is behind it, the great Lebanese companies, it's not concerned about it. Obviously, their children are not going to a civil war. Their children are going to Europe. And the ones who are going are the children of the worker people, the campesinos. So when we talk of independent governments, we are talking, it shows about overthrowing the government and setting up a government, and they're doing it by conditioning economical help. But the curious thing about it is that when they talk about this, they at the same time they keep economic restrictions. This is curious because it's the same thing that, and I'm sorry that I'm bringing this, but when Donald Trump says that we need to send humanitarian aid to Venezuela, but what humanitarian aid? It's still in the golden. Just keeping a brutal blockade. It's preparing a military intervention alongside Brazil and Colombia against Venezuela. So the human characteristic of United States, he's doing it by throwing bombs, by trying to kill people with hunger, with diseases. Well, as I'm telling you, it's a very special humanism. Yeah, a very special humanism. Well, thank you so much, and I also thank Hassan, both of you, for your time for our critical move. I'll see you soon. Let's take another break. Just remember that there is a strategic move in social media. While the president of Lebanon considers a possible missile attack and rules out the authorship of Hezbollah in Beirut's explosions, the U.S. proposes the FBI to investigate. France and Germany are conditioning their help. What interests are on the board? Give us your opinion and stay with us. We'll be back soon. Since my next guest is a great expert in geopolitics, I want to make a brief approach to the history and location of Lebanon, which is a key player in the Middle East. Let's review what role this country plays on the geopolitical board. The gas reserves located in the offshore area between Lebanon and Israel have become the new front of tension between the two nations. According to maps recognized by the United Nations Organization, 860 square kilometers belong to the Arab country, recognized by international law. Located between 1,211 and 1,909 meters below sea level, the area known as Block 9 of the natural gas and oil well sectors in Lebanese territorial waters has one of the largest reserves of fossil fuels in the region. On the other hand, since the implementation of UN Resolution 1701, which ended a war between Israel and Lebanon in 2006, UN peacekeepers document tens of thousands of attacks by Zionist armed Lebanese territory. Michael Aoun's government denounced that this year alone, the Israeli military has disrespected Lebanese jurisdiction 374 times by land, 386 times by sea, and 250 times by air. In addition, for years, Israeli forces have been attacking targets of the Islamic resistance movement, Hezbollah, in an attempt to prevent it from establishing a permanent military presence in the area. In addition to tensions with Israel, there is the economic war unleashed by the United States through its so-called sanctions against Hezbollah, which it calls a terrorist group. In addition to this Western campaign, the European Union has joined. Experts assure that after the explosions in the port of Beirut last August 4th, Lebanon is the scene of two diametrically opposed visions, which marks the current geopolitical context of the Arab nation. On the one hand, there are the demonstrations of solidarity of Iran, Russia, Syria, among other countries, to rebuild what was destroyed, always respecting the sovereignty and non-interference. Meanwhile, the United States conditions its help to the presence of FBI investigators in the investigation of the explosions. Similar demands were made by French President Emmanuel Macron and German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas. We continue with the analysis. We have from Venezuela Dr. Isabel Franchi. She's a Lebanese lawyer, expert in Middle Eastern topics. As always, welcome to our critical move. I wanted to leave you for the end because I just want to focus on your usual geopolitical analysis. And along with that geopolitical analysis, I propose you to analyze what some experts are already saying. Many experts are amazed at the speed with which this help comes from Western powers to Lebanon. When we compare it, for example, with the war in Syria, the war in Yemen, the war in Libya, where it was attacked first, and then it was a long time before the powers offered their help. Of course, we cannot yet speak of an attack because it's not been certified. Well, thank you so much for the invitation. And also we can say that in front of the impulse of these big international powers, all this tragedy in the world, everything has a consensus. At a level economical and political, this oblige these powers to offer help to position themselves in Lebanon. In the previous analysis, we were able to see that this is already happening. There is a strategic political level that comes about the positioning around the coast, since the occupied parts, Gaza Strip, and the coast of Syria, which is an oil zone. So in this area, we see in Lebanon this highest part. They call it Sheikh because through the 365 days of the year, you can find there a lot of presence of. This is an area where where there is a serious lacking of drinkable water, without speaking of Java and other places where this dispute is being carried out at an international and national level, and also where there is one of the most beautiful zones where there is a lot of water, where there is the occupying state of Israel, and we see their extraction and domination. And there is also a fertile ground, and it's important that Lebanon and the occupied Palestine and Syria. So this position, we have seen it throughout centuries, that Lebanon has always in the center of the hurricane, always in the center, always Lebanon have had to face a non-free life, not in peace, and not dignify their people. But let's say that everything that happens in the Middle East, it affects directly Lebanon. Let's say that if you don't go into what it has been said before in their political system, let's say that offers like a fertile field for this situation. And also talking about this port that was recently destroyed, well, I should say that it's an attack, although there is no an official declaration so far by the Lebanese state on this particular issue. But this Lebanese port, it's the second one after the Haifa port in the occupied Palestine. So it is important that is directed to Africa and Europe. So in the midst of this situation, there is enough reasons for all of these forces, English ones, American ones, or French ones, or Iranian ones, or even Russian and Turkish as well. Well, all of this, they accelerate themselves to put themselves in this zone, in the midst of a conflict, where there is, where we can find two very important facts. Yesterday came out the decision of an international tribunal for the assassination of Prime Minister Hariri. And then we saw the Article 7 of United Nations where obliged Israel, and in all it says that that's finding out, and that tribunal implemented with the political objective of getting one more time to resistance, that have advocated that it is an element, an important part of the political chess that changed the forces in Lebanon. So this situation upon the resistance might get to mark a milestone when it comes to the position and the approach and to bring international factors. So beyond that situation, it has a more political transcendence, or it tried to bring international factors. So this Lebanese, when it comes to cases, so the former Hezbollah, and in the midst of two events, let's just say very important events, as you have rightly stated, this misfortune occurs in the Lebanese port. And there is also a fact that we cannot fail to mention, and that is the recent diplomatic reapproachment between the State of Israel and the United Arab Emirates, So the question is, how could this event directly or indirectly affect this situation in Lebanon? Or to what extent could the current socio-political situation in Lebanon have influenced this rapprochement between the United Arab Emirates and Israel? Does it have anything to do? Are they disconnected? Or does it have something to do with that geopolitics, which at the end of the day always points to the state of Israel and affects the already very not respected Palestine? Of course, any advance of the state of colonial state of Israel, and when it comes to peace negotiation, is based upon, as we say, each peace agreement is related to, we say, if we can find a way, it's like dust in the wind, if we could say that. For instance, so Israel came signing after this situation in the sense, so all relationships with Jordan, and we see today that it has made a key with Arab Emirates, this organization, and their relation with the Israeli state. And then we see the outbreak, or we see the destruction of the Lebanese port. So, of course, that it's relative with the scenario of this magnitude, as I said before. It's related to situation that I've said before are very important to be able to understand the access to them. So, well, the Hezbollah role today, it's very important, and it's very related to what is happening with Israel, what happens in Israel, because every time they surrounded the resistance and they go against the presence of Israel in Palestine, and they occupy territory of their presence in Syria. So every time they do that, well, they try to surround it, to try to advance a little bit more in this level, at this level. So what has happened in Emirates? It comes with a decision that has been criticized at both national and international level, and it has a not well-received response when it comes to the policies from them to politicize the situation with Israel. The truth is that they're violating all the laws against the Palestinian Brotherhood, and they're going against Al-Aqsa. And Muslims have this connotation, very important religious connotation, very important. And when it comes to the decision of adding more Palestinian territories to the colonial state of Israel, expansionist, and therefore this policy has come to been asked in the Arab world. So what benefits could bring these organizations? What will be the benefit if we are going to make a balance? Well, it benefits more the Arab Emirates, but we also see this policy that comes as an obedient policy to the interest of the United States, the ones we are seeing, that it's working as a protector of these countries on the Gulf, Persian Gulf, or Saudi Arabia, and they were given ideologically through time based on these Huntington doctrines, and in the war on the Middle East is based. This new war is based upon the clash of civilizations, the religion clashes between Muslims, Ashenians, which some of them are represented by as a danger, as the peoples of Iran, and this civilization and the internal stability, and also the thrones which are international interests and are protected by the American hegemon. So they're paying in favor of the United States, and is trying to this is what intends the normalization of this situation. So the putschment of son-in-law of Trump and Trump's administration regarding the deal of the century negotiation to carry out this plan of mobilizing the Palestinian people and to end up with everything that comes to be this Palestine in the hands of a colonial state. A Palestine, as we said before, not respected, but now respected according to the Zionist state's adversity campaign, because we know that it's a really beaten, besieged, colonized Palestine. Doctor, thank you so much for all your appreciations and for your words. Thank you. Let's go to conclusions. There is always somebody ready to take advantage of a chaotic situation, says a popular saying. The interesting thing here is to give a name to those people who are trying to profit from the misfortune that affects the Lebanese people. Names that could match the first ones to land in Beirut after the tragic events of last August 4th. By coincidence, the same people who dispute the leadership of that very desirable area, because it is a balcony to the Mediterranean of the always conflicting Arab world. And I said conflicting here, meaning a far stood up from the West. If the FBI takes part in the investigations, who could be pointed out with the accusing finger? Are we at the doors of a new Afghanistan? We will see. For today, we close the geopolitical board.